Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Our focus today, a sequence to help improve posture. Make sure that you've got a chair, 2 blocks, a belt and a blanket. We'll get started. Let's begin with Ustrasana, a concave spine version of Ustrasana. We'll use tall blocks for the hands. So position the blocks directly under your shoulders so that your arms are vertical. Step your feet back, ankles under your hips, the arms and the legs parallel with one another, and the spine parallel to the floor. You're raising your head, and we found the basic shape of the pose. And then some of the key actions in the pose. We want eventually to get to the knee region and to lift the kneecaps up. But before we do that, go straight away to the big toe bases and firmly press them down. Notice how that counteracts the tendency for the knee to push back, to hyperextend as we lift the kneecap up. And better still, notice in doing that, we're able to stabilize the shin bone, keep it firm with the kneecaps lifting, and then that grip in the kneecap can work its way to the tops of the thighs, and making sure that that part of the leg is held stable, the thigh bone there pressing back into the leg, similar to the sensation of hanging in yoga ropes. Many of you will be familiar with having the yoga ropes in the thigh creases. And it just helps to stabilize not just the thigh region, but also the pelvis itself, as we then work to lengthen the spine. So pressing their hands down, lengthening out initially through the sides of the waist. Building on that, pressing the hands down, the sides of the chest move forwards. As you then lift your head up, feel that extra containment that comes to the thoracic spine between the shoulder blades. We get more control of that region and we can move it in. Extra space is created by that, whereby the chest moves forwards. And just check that the chest and the chin moving together in a forward direction out towards the center of the room. All right, and then release. Let's stay with similar actions, but we'll turn the pose around and work with our hands to the wall. And rather than placing the hands at hip height to the wall, let's work higher. So if you step in close to the wall so that you can place your hand with your fingertips level to the tops of the shoulders, fingers spreading, wrists shoulder width, and then step the feet back. And step the feet back until the ankles sit directly underneath the hips so that the legs are vertical. And same action with the legs. Eventually we want to get to that action of lifting the kneecap, and we want that kneecap action to find its way into the tops of the thighs. But first of all we need to go to the big toe bases and pressing down there so that that shin region is stable, that area of the shin just under the knee. Ideally it's not pushing back, but just held firm whilst the kneecaps grip, and then the big toe base is pressing down, the kneecaps gripping, helps to direct our focus more to the tops of the thighs, and they can move back. Move back as far as possible away from the wall. So the tops of the thighs press back, and the pubic bone as well presses back. Now we've consciously brought the hands higher than hip height, and it does invite that tendency for the body to sink in a couple of areas. First of all, the elbow region. So thighs press back, pubic bone move back. Keeping that, resist the elbows, lift them up. So you're pressing your hands into the wall to maintain that height in the elbows. But then the other area that tends to sink is that area around the region of the lumbar spine, the lower back. So to get there, we press the thighs back, we allow the pubic bone to move back, but in addition to that, without losing that, we move the back of the pelvis away from the spine. You'll feel your pelvis tilt a fraction so that the sitting bones move down, the pubic bone moves a little towards the navel. Importantly, you'll feel that support, that firmness in the lower back area. You might even feel that the core muscle group there, deep in that abdominal area, engages slightly and just gives the support, a little bit of the spine, a little bit of support from underneath, so it's less inclined to sink, to sag down towards the floor. All right, and then step forwards to come out of the pose. Let's come up to the end of the mat furthest away from the wall and Tadasana. I'll give you a moment just to find the basic shape of the pose. Have your feet together. Make a straight line with the body, so the head and shoulders above the hips above the ankles. The arms classically down by the sides with the palms facing the body, but let's just temporarily adjust that hand position so that we bring the hands onto the abdominal area. So your palms facing inwards, the hands on the abdomen. Make sure that you can feel the navel region and the area of the abdomen above the navel. And just notice what happens there in that region of the abdomen as we work our way through some key actions in Tadasana. The first one, the front thighs lifting and pressing back. And feel there's quite an independence there. The thighs can do their thing without the abdomen really being affected by what happens there. So we can grip the thighs, lift them, press them back, but the hands can feel that the abdomen is unchanged by that action. Building on that, we can add a second action, so the thighs lifting and pressing back, but add to that the back of the pelvis moving in. And just check for any change in the abdominal area. Again, possible for both of those actions to occur without really affecting anything in the abdominal region. But then the third action that we add and feel what it does. So front thighs resist back, move the back of the pelvis in, but add to that, drawing the tailbone in and down. And that last action you can feel with the hands. It brings some firmness to that abdominal area and the muscles deep back in that region adjacent to the spine. Notice how it helps to support not just the legs, not just the pelvis, but the lower back as we then bring our arms back down by the sides. And now that we've stabilized the lower back, we can work more to access mobility into the upper back. So straighten your elbows, roll your shoulders back, move your shoulder blades in, and lift the chest. Move the thoracic spine in as the chest lifts, but maintain that stability around the pelvis. Make sure that you're not confusing the chest moving forwards with the lower back pushing forwards. Okay, and we'll work to bring that action to downward facing dog pose, and then the plank position, which prepares us for Chaturanga Dandasana. We won't be going to Chaturanga Dandasana today, but just staying with that plank position. So let's bend the knees, place your hands down to the floor, ready for Ardha Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog pose. And then step your feet back as we've been working in the pose. The last couple of classes, the hands are pressing down, but in addition to that, as they press down, as if stretching the mat away from the feet, and noting how that creates that diagonal lift up through the shoulders, through the spine, the sides of the ribs lifting up and back. And then we can build on that with the legs as the hands press down into the floor simultaneously, the thighs lift up and press back. So we get that lift in the sides of the ribs, the pelvis as well, lifting up and back, and the thigh bones as well, lifting up and back. Descend the heels down towards the floor whilst keeping the thigh bones pressing back. All right, from downward facing dog pose, we'll come now to that plank position that prepares us for Chaturanga Dandasana. And to get there, we'll lunge forwards, keeping the elbows straight, keeping the knees straight. We'll bring, first of all, the shoulders over the wrists. And just feel, if we do that and only that, the pelvis is still lifting up. So we want to make as straight a line as possible from the shoulders through the hips back to the ankles, as we were doing in Tadasana. To do that, we need to allow the shoulders to come just a little further forwards. So the shoulders align more with the fingers. There'll be a slight lean on the upper arm towards the center of the room. Keep your elbows straight, and then allow the pelvis to sit down level in a straight line with the ankles and the shoulders. but we want to avoid the pelvis and the lower back sinking. We've already worked with that action in Tadasana, firm the thighs, move the back of the pelvis in, and the tailbone in and down, and feel that engagement in the core muscle group that prevents the hips from sinking. And then just a matter of opening the chest with the hands, they press down, and as if stretching the floor back towards the feet so that the sternum bone can move forwards. Rather than looking directly down, look down but a little forwards towards the space in front of you. Keeping a straight line with the body, and then pressing back to downward facing dog pose. And step the feet towards the hands. We'll go to Vasisthasana. We'll just quickly work with the preparatory version of the pose first, just so that you're familiar with the shape of the pose. Bring the right arm out to the side, wrist at shoulder height, fingers spreading, fingers pointing up. We'll today work with the feet together and making a straight line with the body. So ankles, pelvis, and the shoulders in vertical alignment. We'll bring the left hand onto the hip initially. So we're using this as a preparatory pose just to get the basic shape of the pose, but then eventually we'll be rotating the pose so that rather than having the hand to the wall, we'll be balancing on the hand to the floor. And potentially that can involve a lot of muscular effort, but that's particularly the case if we're not using our skeletal strength. So let's use this particular version of the pose to align the bones in the body to make that sense of skeletal strength. So we press the hand into the wall, lift the elbow joint up, keeping that height in the elbow, squeeze the shoulder socket back down into the body, pressing the hand into the wall, move the shoulder blade, right shoulder blade in, the right chest opens, the left shoulder can come back. Make sure that you've found that Tadasana action that we've just worked with. Front thighs firm, back of the pelvis in, tailbone down, so that there's some engagement with that core muscle group. Just to feel that more Tadasana-like quality, bring the left arm now down by the side, actively as we do in Tadasana, elbow straight, palm facing the body. All right, and then release and change sides, feet together. Right arm in Tadasana down by the sides. Elbow lift up. The left shoulder, draw it down into the body. Move the left shoulder blade in. And we're just searching there for that basic framework within the body that is less reliant on muscular effort. If the elbow's bending a little, it will invite more muscular movement. If the shoulder's pushing up, it will invite more muscular movement. If the shoulder blade, left shoulder blade, is loose and sliding around on the back ribs, it's going to create more muscular effort. The other aspect is balance. If the hips are protruding back, if the chest is leaning forwards, then we need to use muscular effort to keep the body in an upright position. When we have that Tadasana-like alignment, we can, again, just rely on that inner frame of the body, the skeleton, without being so necessary to reinforce the body with muscular effort. All right, so with that in mind, let's take the pose to the full Vasisthasana. We'll begin back again in downward facing dog pose. And we'll have the feet together, big toes, inner heels touching. Make sure that you're right in the center of the mat with the feet. Look down at the mat, directly down underneath the skull. And we'll use as a reference point that section of the mat that's currently underneath the armpits. So we're going to be, in a moment, placing fingertips at that section of the mat just to assist with our balance. So we'll get there, but first of all, bring the right hand into the center of the mat. And then the left hand, we slide it back, just the fingertips to the floor in that section of the mat, just under the armpit. And the job of that left hand is just to help us balance, a bit like a training wheel on a bike, as we then turn onto the outer edge of the right foot. Make sure the right foot's in the center of the mat. Still with that left hand assisting the balance, bring the left ankle to rest on top of the ankle. Still with the left fingertips to the floor helping the balance, move the hips in. Notice how the tendency for the hips to protrude back, move the hips in, and then we can bring the left hand up onto the hip. Notice how the hips tend to drop. So right big toe base down to lift the hips up, and then right shoulder blade in, left shoulder back, and then we'll extend the top arm up. All right, and then bring the hand back to the floor and press back to downward facing dog pose. So working to keep that skeletal alignment, the shoulders vertically aligned, the shoulders, the hips, the ankles in the same vertical plane. Let's go to the left side. Bring the left hand into the center of the mat, the right fingertips to the floor under the right shoulder, and then using that right hand to assist the balance as we turn onto the outer edge of the left foot, bringing the right ankle onto the left ankle. Make sure that the hips have moved in. Think of Tadasana, shoulders, hips, ankles in the same vertical plane, and then bringing the right hand onto the hip. Left big toe base down to lift the hips, right shoulder back, and then extending the top arm up. Left shoulder blade in as you reach up into the fingertips of the top hand. And then hand back to the floor and press back to downward facing dog pose. And then walk your feet towards your hands to come out of the pose. Let's then take our belt and adjust the buckle of the belt to make a loop that when we place that loop around our wrists and press out into the belt, our wrists are held at shoulder width distance. And let's then come back to Tadasana. We'll have the belt around both wrists, the arms and the belt behind the back, and standing in Tadasana, feet together. You've got the palms of the hands facing one another. So your thumbs are pointing forwards, the palms are parallel to one another. We'll get to the work in the belt and the upper body shortly, but let's re-establish that action from the legs that helps to stabilize not just the legs, not just the pelvis, but also the lower back. So front thighs resist back, kneecaps gripping. Make sure that the big toe bases are firmly pressing down. And again, it prevents us from locking the knee, pushing the shin back. If we do that, we won't get that same access to the top of the leg. So big toe bases firm, the kneecaps grip, the front thighs firm, resisting back into the body. In balance with that, the back of the pelvis, it moves in. And then that key action with the back of the pelvis moving in, with the front thighs resisting, we draw the tailbone in and down. And that invites the core muscle group to engage. We don't want to harden the abdomen, but equally just feeling that very subtle grip deep in the abdomen that helps to stabilize the lower back so that we are able to then open the chest and the upper back without pushing the lumbar spine forwards and creating an over curvature in the lumbar spine. So press out into the belt, and where the upper arm bones meet the shoulders, draw back towards the wall behind. Press out into the belt, keeping the shoulders back. Move your shoulder blades in. As the shoulder blades move in, the spine between the shoulder blades move in. Press out into the belt, shoulder blades in, and lift the chest, sides of the chest lift up. Press out into the belt, keep that lift in the sides of the chest. Move the arms and the belt downwards towards the floor. And then we'll just a little bit lift the head to look upwards towards the ceiling above, just to check that the chin and the sternum bone, the breastbone, moving together, both of them lifting up towards the ceiling above. To ensure that there's comfort in the neck as the head looks up, you need to make sure that the shoulders, the trapezius, the arms and the belt stay downwards towards the floor. And then look forwards again, and we'll keep the belt there. Left heel back to the wall as we go to Purvottanasana. Right foot is the front foot, legs length distance between the feet, the left foot turned deeply in. Press out into the belt. Shoulders back, shoulder blades in, chest lifting. And then just steady your balance. No sudden movements of the head as we look up towards the ceiling, ensuring that the chin and the chest moving together, keeping the shoulders down away from the ears. And then coming forwards, we'll just come halfway down into the pose. As we did with Ustrasana earlier in the sequence, we're aiming to keep the spine parallel to the floor. And pressing out into the belt so that the shoulders lift and draw back away from the ears. Pressing into the belt, move the shoulder blades in so that the chest opens. Sides of the chest move forwards. And then lift the head up so that your vision, your gaze, comes more towards the ceiling opposite. Notice how that gives you that little bit more control of the upper back. It straightens, it moves into the body. Making sure that the chin and the sternum bone moving outwards towards the center of the room. The arms and the belt drawing back towards the wall behind. And then release and come up. And we'll change sides. Right heel back to the wall. Press out into the belt. Chest, chin lifting as we look up. Press out into the belt, move the shoulder blades in and draw the belt, the arms, the trapezius muscle down, the sides of the neck down, and then come forwards. And having the belt there gives us an improved ability to adjust the upper back in this particular position. If the belt wasn't there, we'd be more inclined to be rounding in that upper back area. The spine, the ribs in that region pushing up into the skin of the back. Instead, with the belt there, we press into the belt and we can contain the upper back, move it down into the body. And the chest move forwards, lift the head up, look higher up the wall opposite, chin and the chest moving together towards the center of the room. Resist the arms back towards the wall behind. And then release and come up. We'll keep our belt within reach. Just put it off to the side for the moment. We'll be lying on our front now. We'll be going to Salabhasana, just the half version of Salabhasana today. We'll keep our feet to the floor. Important that you've got enough room behind you so that you can, with your legs straight, point your toes back without reaching the wall. We'll have your feet hip width apart. If you're on a hard floor surface, we will be pressing the front of the pelvis down. Potentially you might need to take some padding, a flat blanket under the front of the pelvis. If it's uncomfortable for you to push firmly the front of the pelvis into the floor. So take the extra blanket if you need. Bring your arms straight out beside you, palms facing up. And so we'll be keeping the legs in contact with the floor, the feet in contact with the floor. We'll be working to lift the head, the chest, the shoulders, the arms off the floor. The work in the legs though, we'll establish that first of all. Press your feet down into the floor so that your kneecaps grip and lift up. Make sure that you're not rolling towards the big toe side, so staying on the center of the foot. Maintaining that, building on that, we press the front of the pelvis down without the pubic bone dominating. So work your way across, so the front of each hip press down, so that we're evenly pressing the front of the pelvis down into the floor. And then lift your head, your shoulders, your arms, your feet stay in contact with the floor. So it's just a half version of Salabhasana. Lift the head, lift the chest, lift the shoulders, lift the arms, and just scan the back muscles there, feel where the work is occurring, and just notice the tendency of this version of the pose to load the muscles in the lumbar region, so paraspinal muscles that run either side of the spine there towards the lumbar region. Also the mid-back, it's a little harder for us to access the upper back. In that sense, the pose stays a bit flat there. So we're working to roll our shoulders back, move our shoulder blades in, and the chest forwards. But notice the difficulty to access that particular region of the body. And then release down. Just rest for a moment with the forehead resting onto the forearms. Make sure that you can reach your belt. We'll come back a second time into the pose, and this time using a belt. And a moment to position the loop of the belt around both wrists with the arms and the belt behind the back. We worked with this very similar action a moment ago in a version of Tadasana. Have the palms parallel, your fingers are spreading, the thumbs are pointing down towards the floor. And we'll get to the belt in a moment, but first of all, same action with the legs, feet pressed down, the whole of the front of the pelvis pressed down into the floor, and then lift the head, the shoulders, the chest, the arms off the floor. Again, we feel that natural tendency for the lower back to work, the mid back to work, and now we want to engage the upper back. The belt helps with that. Press out into the belt where the upper arm bones meet the shoulders, lift up and draw back. Pressing out into the belt, move your shoulder blades in. Notice we've improved our ability to access the muscles in that upper part of the back, firm them, use them to press the shoulder blades deep into the body, shoulder blades in, and then the chest moves forwards. As the chest moves forwards, draw the shoulders, the arms, the belt, the trapezius back towards the wall behind. And then we'll release and come up, and we'll take our chair now and we'll place the chair up against the wall. We'll be pressing down onto the chair. The chair will be in contact with the wall. If you need a blanket to put over the top of the chair so that it doesn't mark your wall, then do so. And then just to be really clear with the hand position here on the chair. So we've got, most yoga chairs will have this V where the front and the back legs of the chair meet. We want to make sure that our hands are in front of the V, the heel of the hand on the seat of the chair, and the fingers hook around and underneath the seat of the chair. It's important that you get a really firm push with the heel of the hand down. Eventually, when both hands do that, it will give us the ability to lift our pelvis, our whole body upwards. So both hands positioned that way. Notice how the hips need to come forwards to give the hands space. And we bring the sitting bones just over the edge of the seat of the chair. So we're sort of keeping the pelvis there more from the traction of the skin there behind the sitting bones in that tailbone region of the body. So it's a little precarious with the pelvis, but the hands are securely holding us in position there. And then check where your shoulders are relative to your wrists. So the shoulders need to roll back, but just to the point where they sit directly above the wrists. A lot of the potential for upward lift will be lost if you bring your shoulders further back than that. So, and the wall will be a good reality check. Eventually, when we look up in this pose, there'll be room for the head. If the wall is too close for the head to look up, it's an indicator that the shoulders have moved too far back. We'll position the legs, so just slide the feet out so that the legs are straight, but have the balls of the feet off the floor at this stage. The last thing that will happen in the pose when we lift up will be that the ball of the foot will come down. And then press your hands down into the seat of the chair. Roll your shoulders back, align the shoulders directly above the wrists. Pressing the hands down, scoop your back ribs into the body, lift your chest as high as possible. Just check that point. Press the hands down, roll the shoulders back, and arch the upper back. Move it deep into the body. Shoulder blades lifting, chest lifting. Now, in order for the balls of the feet to come down, when the hips now lift, they need to lift but also move outwards towards the center of the room. Without your shoulders leaning back, press the hands down, press the heels down, and lift your hips forwards and upwards. And then the balls of the feet come down. The buttocks will lift the hips. The hands pressing down lifts the chest. And you can look up towards the ceiling above, make sure that there's room for the head. Hands press down, shoulder blades lift up, chest lift up. Big toe bases press down with the knees straight. Lift the buttock flesh upwards and forwards. Make sure that your navel is releasing down towards the spine. sit the hips back to the seat of the chair, and we'll then come to kneeling. Work with a couple of versions of Ustrasana using the chair. This first one will leave just a little bit of a gap between the buttocks and the seat of the chair. If the floor is hard on your knees or the heads of the shins, reach forwards, double the mat over, double fold it so that you get that double thickness under the knees. And then place your hands flat onto the seat of the chair. The thumbs come out towards the outside of the chair, the little fingers are closer together, with the fingers pointing back. And then key action in Ustrasana, the shins press down, choose the bit nearest the ankle, and pressing down there helps the hips to stay forwards. Shins press down, hips move forwards with the backs of the thighs lifting. And then there's no contradiction, the backs of the thighs lifting as the hips move forwards, but the tailbone moving in and down. Make sure that you get both of those actions simultaneously. The backs of the thighs lifting with the hips forwards, the tailbone moving in and down with the hips forwards. And then the hands, they press onto the seat of the chair to scoop the back ribs in and lift the chest up. Keep the shoulders rolling back and just building on that as the hands press down. It's as if stretching the seat of the chair in an outward direction. Shoulder blades move in, sides of the chest lift up, and then we can lift the head and look up towards the ceiling above, and pressing the heels of the hands down into the seat of the chair, ensure that the chest and the chin lifting together. And then look forwards, and we'll reverse back a little so that the buttocks come just a little bit closer to the seat of the chair. It allows us now to reach with the hands up onto the side frame of the chair, or the backrest of the chair, and come all the way up that frame, the backrest of the chair, almost to the hands coming onto the top. Make sure that your thumbs are pointing downwards towards the floor. And then straighten your elbows, so you grip with the hands in order to straighten the elbows. Don't confuse that with locking the elbows. So just the elbows in a visibly straight line. And then as the hands grip the frame of the chair, similar to the action in the previous version where we were just stretching the seat of the chair wider, here we're doing that to the frame of the chair, with each hand pulling the chair in an outward direction, as if we're trying to widen the frame there on the chair. As we do that, move the shoulder blades in, the chest lifts up, still the shins pressing down with the hips forwards, the chest lifts. So that action of gripping with the hands and as if widening the frame of the chair, we'll add one further action, gripping with the hands and as if pushing the chair down more firmly into the floor. So that each of the 4 feet of the chair make a more increased indent into the yoga mat. Press the chair down. Notice how that helps to generate lift up through the spine, the chest. And we can look up towards the ceiling above, making sure that the chin and the sternum bone lifting together. Okay, and then release. And we'll come up, we'll move the chair a little further out from the wall, and then we'll sit through the chair facing the wall. So we're sitting backwards on the chair with the legs coming through the frame, and then reach back with both hands and hook the hands under the seat of the chair, but in that section of the chair directly behind the pelvis. So we've got the right hand behind the right hip, the left hand behind the left hip, knees over the ankles, and this is a little bit dependent on your arm length relative to your spine length. For some people, just that first position you've come to with the pelvis will enable you to roll your shoulders back, move the shoulder blades in, and get that similar upper back arching and chest opening that we've been working with through several of the poses. For others, so it will be necessary to maintain that grip with the hands and just one sitting bone at a time carefully just walk the sitting bones forwards more, away from the hands. We want to Keep that alignment of the shoulders over the hips. So if you go too far forwards, it will invite leaning back. But we want a really clear sense of resisting with the hands, keeping the elbows straight and having the shoulders firmly pulled back and the arm bones firmly pulled down as the spine and the chest lift up. To encourage that extra lift in the spine, feet pressed to the floor, and that last bit of the back thigh before the buttock, press down onto the seat of the chair, grip with the hands as you lift your spine and chest up, and just to get that little bit of extra extraction of traction from the pose, keeping the spine straight will just a little bit allow the chest to lean forwards, but counteract that by gripping firmly with the fingers on the seat of the chair. Okay, and then release. Now let's just bring our pelvis back to where it started. Those of you that have walked the pelvis forwards will bring it back. Just leaving a little bit of an overlap there with the seat of the chair sitting out further than the back of the pelvis. So don't come too far back. We don't want the hips level with the back of the chair. And then bring the left arm through the frame of the chair. So we've come with the arm through the frame underneath the top of the chair, that cross section at the top of the chair. And then bend the left elbow so that you can hold the right frame of the chair with the elbow bent. We're gripping firmly, like a monkey would hold the bar there with the whole of the fist. Then bring the right hand directly behind the pelvis, hook the fingers as we've just had there under the seat of the chair, and the left hand will lead us into the pose. So with the left hand as if pulling the frame of the chair towards the body, towards the legs. Notice how that turns the back ribs, the left back ribs there under the shoulder blade, but at the expense of the left knee pushing past the right knee. So we'll keep that action with the left hand as if pulling the frame towards the body, but left heel pressed down, left thigh bone draw it back into the pelvis, and with the right side of the body, the right heel pressed down, and move the right hip socket towards the right thigh bone so that the knees stay level, so that the hips stay level. And we're still pulling with that left hand the frame towards us, and now we can walk the right hand further around the chair. Ideally it will come all the way to the left side of the chair, and then as the left hand pulls the frame towards the legs, with the right hand grip the seat of the chair and as if pulling the chair away from the wall as you turn and look over the right shoulder. And then we'll release and hold the left side of the chair with the right hand. Your forearm has come underneath the top of the chair. The left hand holding the seat of the chair behind the pelvis. With the right hand then pulling the frame of the chair towards the legs. Whilst doing that, right heel press down, right thigh bone draw it back into the body. Left heel press down and move the back of the left hip towards the knee. Sometimes we use a block between the knees, gripping a block between the knees to assist with this, keeping the knees level and keeping the pelvis level. As we then continue with the twist, walking the left hand all the way around to the right side of the chair, gripping firmly with the right hand as if pulling the frame of the chair towards the legs, with the left hand as if pulling the seat of the chair away from the wall. As we turn and look over the left shoulder, roll the left shoulder back, move the left shoulder blade in, and then we'll release and come out from the chair. We'll put the chair off to the side. Come into lie on your back. And make sure you've got enough room behind you to extend your arms back and over your head. So we'll start with the legs bent, the feet flat to the floor, and then reach over with the arms, bring the arms back to the floor behind, and then bend your knees into your chest. Feel the region where the spine and the back of the pelvis join. Press it down into the floor. So you're making your lower back flat, firmly flat to the floor. Maintain that firmness in the lower back as you now straighten your legs up towards the vertical position. Back of the pelvis pressed down, lower back waist pressed down with the knees straight. Back waist pressed to the floor, knees straight, bring the ankles together. Back waist pressed down, knees straight, ankles together, inner heels lift up and the big toe bases lift up. Reach out into the fingertips. Let's feel the action there in the abdomen. Those muscles working, but they're drawing down deeper into the body as opposed to pushing visibly up into the clothing. So the abdominal work there, deep back into that core muscle group, pressing the spine down and into the floor. Knees straight, soles of the feet extending up. Okay, and then bring the arms back beside the hips, bend your knees and release down. And we'll bring the feet then to the wall. So just subtly strengthening the core muscle group. Good for that ability to lift the spine up against the effect of gravity. The other thing that can negatively impact your posture, one of the many things, is the tightness around the hamstring area. And Supta Padangusthasana, let's bend the right knee, place the belt under the ball of the right foot, and then extend the right leg up so that we're able to lengthen, improve mobility in that right hamstring, but with the spine supported by the floor. Now most of us will have a habitual way of coming into the pose, of holding that right leg. So we'll come to that first of all, but then let's ease off on the pose so that we let out a little bit more of the belt to allow the leg to come 10 degrees, roughly 10 degrees back towards the wall. You feel then we've just removed some of that muscular tension from the pose. With it gone, feel how we can then more readily adjust the pelvis so that the right hip can move towards the wall level with the left hip. And then the left thigh can press down, left foot press into the wall. So now that we've brought the hips level and that left leg straight, it's just a matter of maintaining that without losing that. We bring the leg back to its original position by bending the elbows, but make sure that you're keeping the hips level. Just bend the elbows and the leg comes back, so that roughly 10 degrees back to its original position. You might find now that the leg can come that little bit further over, but without distorting the hips. Keep the right hip level to the left hip. Left thigh press down, left foot press into the wall. Right big toe base extend up. And then we'll release, right foot to the wall, and we'll come to the left side. Left leg take up, and again, probably have that habitual way of coming into the pose. We can start with that, and then just ease off the pose. Let the leg come, say 10 degrees closer to the wall. Right foot press into the wall, right thigh press down. Left hip, move it towards the wall so that the hips are level. Keeping the hips level, keeping the right leg straight. Then bend your elbows so that the leg returns back to its original position, say 10 degrees roughly, back towards the center of the room. Make sure that the left knee remains straight. Hips are level, right foot pressed to the wall. Left big toe base lift upwards. Keep the shoulders back to the floor, chest open. And then we'll release. And let's go to Shavasana. We'll take a half-fold blanket for the head. And then lying on your back, arms out by your sides. A moment just to find the basic shape of the pose. A moment there to settle. As we did in the previous pose, working just to disrupt initially that habitual way of coming into the pose and seeing if something new shows up as a result of that disruption. We can do a similar thing here with the breath. We'll try not to fiddle too much with the breath. In Shavasana we want the breath to be natural and spontaneous, but just as a starting point there, next couple of cycles, when you complete the exhalation, just watch for that point and then just briefly hold the breath at that point. It won't be for long, just a 1-2 count, 2-3 count roughly. Just stop the breath there for a short period of time, and then just see what shows up when the next cycle of breath kicks in and returns. See if it's just shown some habitual way of working with the breath rhythm that isn't necessarily such a natural and spontaneous way of breathing. So for most of us there'll be more of a natural pause after the exhalation, one that we can easily locate and potentially prolong a little bit if we wish to. Maybe more subtle, but look for at the top of the in-breath, right at the point where the chest is as full as it will become. And then again, just for the next few cycles of breath, just consciously but briefly interrupt the breath at that point and just pause the breath. Again, a 1-2, 1-2-3 count. Just enough to disrupt the habitual breathing. And then when the exhalation eventually returns, notice how we've got an improved ability to stay relaxed at the start of the exhalation. Often at that point we push the breath, feed it a little too much energy. So we can slow it down, release and relax during that point, and it sets out a more even and consistent rate of exit for the exhalation. And then once it comes the very end of the exhalation, we're a little bit less inclined to peter out. Often that's the point where the breath runs out of energy. So we can just smooth out that transition before the next cycle of breath kicks in. At this point, ideally we've arrived at a very natural, spontaneous way of breathing, rhythm of breathing, and we just stick to that, get out of the way of the breath and allow the breath to have its own momentum. Smooth, soft inhalation, smooth, soft exhalation. Alright, and then we'll take a couple of slightly deeper in-breaths, and then bend your knees so your feet come back flat to the floor. Bring your hands across your chest or abdomen. Eyes open. And roll to the side to come up. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.